She screamed when she saw her newborn Doberman puppies hanging. What happened next was unbelievable. I had seen people burned alive before, and I had hauled a teammate out of a pile of ash, and I thought I'd learned how to steel myself against whatever horror could come next. But never had anything standing before me made my chest tighten like a fist. 3 small things dangled from a low tree limb, swaying in a noon so hot it read like 102 degrees on the air, and at first I thought they were trash bags until they began to move. I hit the brakes, the tires screaming across a sun-cracked road. The door flew open and the heat hit me like a slap. And that's when I saw it. A Doberman, nothing but bone under skin. Its neck cinched with a length of rusted wire that had cut into flesh and was fresh with blood, and it didn't howl or bark, but made this broken sound part breath, part sob that pierced right through me. Its eyes, God, those eyes locked on me, with a look that wasn't animal at all, but like a mother begging. I stepped forward, the ground burning under my boots, my hand shaking despite myself, and the coppery tang of blood and char still clung to the air from the morning blaze. I felt hollowed out and exhausted to the marrow, but whatever stood there lit rage through my veins like gasoline. 3 newborn pups hung there naked and raw, their skin matted with blood and suspended by red cords from a low branch. They twitched once, twice, and went still, the sun turning their tiny bodies the color of bruises. The mother vaulted and tried to lick each one to pull them close, and the wire jerked her back so hard she toppled and collapsed. I screamed into the empty road, my voice ripped and rough. "You filthy scum! Try being strung up in the sun, you bastard!" No answer came. Only the wind and the faint failing breaths of those little lives. I ran to my truck and grabbed the bolt cutters, sweat and ash stinging my eyes, and I set the kit down. Braced, my foot reached up and started cutting. The branch creaked like old bones, one good tug, and it would snap, so I held my breath and bit down the first wire. A tiny body fell like a scrap of paper, burning to the touch, soft as melting wax, and I caught it, shoved it inside my jacket, and went at the second cord. One more life came free, silent as a prayer, and the mother choked out a rasping moan as she licked and licked, voice raw and hollow. My hand shook for the last one, and blood ran from a nick across my palm onto my sleeve. But when that final cord gave way, something in me crumpled with it, and I fell to my knees on the searing dirt. All 3 pups lay in my hand so small I had to press my ear close to hear the faint rise of lungs. One breath, a whisper of life. I looked at the mother, her neck still ringed with a chain, her teeth sunk into the metal, until her gums bled and I cut through the last shackle. When that previous link broke, she didn't run or bark. She simply lay down, licked my hand, and then lay her muzzle across her baby's. I glanced up at the sky, the sun, a hard, furious coin, and for a moment the world around us was nothing but silent smoke and the iron smell of blood. No one else was there. No one had watched. Only one thing echoed inside my head. We cannot leave them. I loaded the 4 of them into my truck, 3 pups on the seat, Raven, as I'd named her, at my side. Still licking, still trembling from the effort of staying alive, and my jacket was soaked with blood and drool. The temperature gauge leapt as I started the engine, and my heart battered at my ribs so hard I thought I might suffocate. I said it softly, each word like a vow. No one will hurt you again. Not while I still breathe. The truck left the shoulder, the tires grinding through a ribbon of dust stained red, and when I glanced in the rear view, the tree still stood stripped and bare, a cruel marker of what had been done. I stared straight ahead, knuckles white on the wheel, mouth dry as ash. I was no longer the firefighter heading home. I was the man who'd pulled 4 souls out of hell, and I swore out loud into that hot air that I would not let the devil reclaim them a second time. I started the engine and floored the gas. The roar echoed through the suffocating heat of Amarillo's outskirts where the horizon shimmered like a mirage. On the passenger seat, Raven curled around her 3 newborns, each wrapped in my turnout jacket. Tiny, damp bodies breathing as faintly as smoke threads. There was no time left to think. I just knew I had to reach the rescue center before the light went out in their chests. The asphalt wavered under the sun and the temperature needle crept upward on the dashboard. Sweat soaked my collar, mixing with the metallic tang of smoke still clinging from the morning fire. Inside my head, one thought pounded over and over. Don't let them die in your hands. I flicked on the radio. Amarillo Dispatch, this is Firefighter Ethan Cole. I've got an emergency, 3 puppies critical condition. Need veterinary backup now. Only static answered me. A broken hum swallowed by the heat. No one heard. I pressed harder on the pedal, the truck shaking. Raven, stirred eyes half open, licking one fading pup. I steadied her head with a trembling hand. It's okay, girl. We're gonna make it. My voice cracked dry as sandpaper. Texas Highway 385 stretched ahead. Empty, blistered, endless. Then, in the rear view, a flash of light. Headlights flared and an old pickup rolled up behind me, hugging my tail. My gut tightened. It was following me too close to mistake it. I switched lanes. It followed. I slowed. It slowed. Every instinct honed from years on rescue told me this wasn't a chance. The license plate was covered, the driver holding just enough distance to menace. A chill slid down my spine. Someone didn't want me getting these lives to safety. I gripped the wheel. Not today, I muttered, my voice low, heavy as thunder. The engine roared and red Texas dust billowed behind me. The sun glared off the mirror, blinding, but I could still see those beams locked on my tail. Raven panted hard, her breathing blending with the hum of the tires, and one of the pups let out a weak gasp. I knew I couldn't risk a crash. I had to keep speed steady, eyes forward. A curve opened ahead, a stretch of scorched land, dry grass bowing under the wind. I veered right. The pickup surged after me. Dust smeared the windshield until I could barely see. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was my pulse. I shouted into the empty air, voice shaking with fury. What do you want? These are living souls, not garbage to hide. No answer, just the horn's long, mocking blare. I cut across a side road, tires screaming. The truck behind fishtailed, sliding wide, just long enough for me to pull ahead. Dust swallowed it whole. In the mirror, it blurred and vanished. Wind slashed across my face. My mouth was parched, but I couldn't blink. My chest felt like a stone pressing down. Raven's head rested on my thigh, eyes locked on the road as if she understood the danger riding our backs. I glanced at the pups, one barely breathing. I grabbed my water bottle, poured a few drops onto a cloth, and pressed it to its muzzle. A soft cough escaped, a faint sound, life pushing back. That's when I saw it through the haze, a sun-faded sign, Amarillo Animal Haven, 2 miles ahead. I was close, so damn close. Then the growl of an engine behind me again. The pickup reappeared, headlights glaring straight through the rear glass. I clenched my jaw and pushed the pedal down. The road tilted upward, the truck shuddering under strain. Raven barked hoarsely, body leaning forward, shielding her babies with whatever strength she had left. Hold on, girl. Just hold on, I shouted through the wind. I swung left. The pickup followed rear tires, cutting through loose sand. A violent thud cracked, the air dust exploded in a plume, and then silence. I looked back. Nothing but smoke. Only me, Raven, and 3 fragile breaths in the cab. I eased off the gas, heart hammering. Dust coated the windshield like ash. Up ahead, the rescue center's sign gleamed through the heat. I hit the horn and rolled in brakes, screeching to a stop right at the entrance. I threw open the door, lifting all 4 of them from the seat. My legs trembled, throat scorched dry. Help, they're not breathing. "Please, save them," I screamed. Rescue workers burst out, pulling me inside. Raven still licked her pup's eyes, flickering between panic and prayer. I handed them into gloved hands and felt myself breathe for the first time since the road began. Outside, the sun was sinking and a cold wind was rising out of West Texas. I looked through the dust-blurred window toward the empty road. Deep down, I knew the thing that chased us wasn't just a truck. It was evil, and today I'd stolen 3 breaths back from its hands. The rescue center door closed behind me, sealing out the Texas wind and the thick, bitter smell of smoke. Cold, fluorescent light spilled across the concrete floor, catching faint streaks of blood on my sleeve. I laid the 3 tiny bodies on the steel table, my hands trembling while Raven collapsed beside it, panting as if she'd just staggered through a storm. 1 worker rushed in, then 2, then 3. No one asked questions, they just moved. Oxygen tubes, gloves, warm towels, and heart monitors appeared within seconds. I heard someone counting under their breath, 1 heartbeat, maybe 2. I stood frozen, every ounce of strength drained from me. I'd seen life teeter at the edge before, but when people die in fire, at least there's sound, a cry, a shout, a plea. Here, there was only silence. 3 small lives, skin pink and waxy, lay so still they barely seemed real. I bent down, pressing my ear closer. Faintly, so faintly it came the whisper of dried leaves brushing together. I looked up at the nurse, still alive. She didn't answer, just nodded once and kept massaging the pup's chests with gloved fingers. Raven lifted her head, eyes torn between hope and despair, watching her babies. I touched her neck under the scarred skin, the pulse still flickered weakly. I whispered almost a prayer. "It's okay, girl. They're fighters. You are too." A man stepped forward, older sleeves, rolled up silver hair, streaked with ash eyes that had seen too much. "I'm Dr. Raoul. Step aside, firefighter." I backed away, heart hammering. He placed the stethoscope, inserted a glucose line, rubbed their ribs briskly, and wrapped them in towels. Their temperature's dropping fast. Keep them breathing. I grabbed another cloth and worked on the smallest one, rubbing gently. Each touch meant skin growing colder. "Come on, baby, don't quit on me." I didn't know if I was talking to it or to myself. Then Dr. Raoul shouted, "We've got movement." One of them twitched, coughed a broken, tiny sound, and exhaled. It was barely audible, but to me it thundered like lightning, cracking open the sky. My throat closed up. A nurse patted its back. "She's breathing again." I turned to Raven. She pushed herself up, licked her pup's paw, then looked at me. In her eyes, there was no fear left, only gratitude. And in that gaze, I saw the man I used to be 10 years ago, back when I still believed the world had things worth stopping for. The room fell so quiet, I could hear the steady beep-beep of the breathing monitor. I exhaled, really exhaled, for the first time since the road. Cold sweat clung to my back, but I didn't take my hand off Raven's soaked fur. My thoughts drifted to the road outside, the burning asphalt, the hidden pickup, the faceless coward who had hung them like ornaments of cruelty. I felt heat rise in my chest, not the kind I fought with a hose, but another kind, the fire of rage, the fire of a promise. Dr. Raoul's hand landed on my shoulder. "They'll live, but they're weak. We'll need time." I nodded, voice rasping. "Take everything you need. Just don't let them slip." Raven raised her head slowly, licking my hand. Her tongue was warm, her breath shallow but real. She was still here. I didn't know why, but tears came anyway, cutting lines through the soot on my wrist. I sat beside her, dizzy, my mind replaying one image again and again, 3 red cords hanging from a branch, swaying under the sun, and those pleading eyes I would never forget. "Dr. Raoul spoke softly. "You did the right thing, Ethan. You stopped when no one else would. I looked at him, then at Raven and her fragile pups. Stopping wasn't a choice, I said. It was the only thing left that felt human. No one spoke after that. Only the faint rhythm of heartbeats and the sound of a mother Doberman breathing her way back into faith in humankind. I glanced up at the clock, the second hand moving slow and steady. Outside, the light dimmed. Dark clouds gathered. Rain was coming. I stood staring through the window as flashes of lightning lit the distant highway. Somewhere out there, the person who did this was still free, but tonight, 3 tiny breaths had been reclaimed, and that was a beginning. Night fell hard over Amarillo, and the rain began to come down in heavy stone-like drops, and I stood at the rescue center window watching the steam-blurred world beyond where streetlights smeared like blood across the wet pavement, while Raven lay in the bed curled around her 3 pups that had been warmed, their breaths threading with the rain, fragile, yes, but finally real. I should have felt relief, but my chest stayed heavy as a rock. Dr. Raoul motioned for me to sit and rest, but my head wouldn't stop turning toward the memory of those headlights blazing after me on the highway. The feeling hadn't left me, so I pulled on my coat and stepped back outside to check the truck and run through old safety routines because habit keeps you sharp in a job like mine. The wind screamed, carrying the smell of wet earth and burned gasoline, and when I opened the truck door, my heart stopped because the rear latch was ajar, though I knew I'd locked it. Someone had been near my vehicle. I dropped to my knees and swept the flashlight under the chassis, rain flinging mud into the beam, and found fresh footprints in the sod clear as a confession, and beside the rear tire, a length of red cord sodden and identical to the stuff that had bound those little necks. I stood up, scanning the lot. The rain blurred everything into a gray wash, but at the fence line a figure moved, a tall, thin shadow, deliberate and slow, and lightning flashed, catching his eyes for a heartbeat, empty and cold as stone. "Hey!" I shouted into the downpour. "Who's there?" No answer came. Only the fence wire sang in the wind. I stomped through the mud, flashlight clenched like a weapon, and the shadow slid back and melted behind an old storage shed. I ran after it, rain lashing my face, and found only a deep tire rut in the muck, the same tread pattern as the pickup that had tailed me earlier. My chest burned hot and furious. This was no longer merely a rescue. This was evidence of a crime, and someone had come back to erase it. I reached for my phone to call the police, and got a stubborn, useless message, no signal. The rain eating the towers. Dr. Raoul's voice echoed in my head. "Rest, Ethan. You've done enough for today." And I swallowed the anger that wanted to rise because it wasn't enough, not while that person remained free. I would not rest. I trudged back toward the building, heavy as lead, and when I passed the glass I saw Raven watching me, those same eyes I'd first seen under the tree, equal parts terrified and trusting, and I tipped my head in a promise. "I won't let them come for you again," I said, soft but certain. She watched me and her tail gave a tiny exhausted wag. Inside, I wiped mud from floors and checked every lock, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like wet wool. Beneath the steady patter of rain, I heard a deep, slow engine note come up outside, and when I drew the curtain, the old silver pickup idled a few meters from the gate with its headlights boring into the glass like accusatory eyes. My palms slicked with sweat. My phone still read no signal, and then I heard footsteps measured nearer, one step after another. The metal gate at the backyard shivered. Padlocks clicked. I grabbed the pry bar hanging on the wall and ran for the door as the lights flickered my shadow long on the concrete, and when I threw the door wide, the rain slammed in. And there he was, that same tall, dark figure just a few meters away, standing unmoving, head cocked, watching me with his hollow eyes, while a rusted chain scraped across the wet ground at his feet. Why, I yelled into the thunder. "What the hell did they do to you to deserve this?" He smiled, split open, soundless. My knees bent with the sick knowledge of what that smile meant. and I tightened my grip on the bar, ready to move, ready to fight until police sirens cut through the storm. Red lights strobing, and he turned and slipped away into the rain, folding himself into the darkness as if the storm had swallowed him whole. I ran to the fence, but all that remained were deep prints in the mud, the rain already beginning to blur and wash them away. The evidence was vanishing. I stood in the cold rain, heart-pounding breath visible in the light, the center's windows behind me glowing where Raven curled around her pups, whose breaths came faint but steady. And I realized in a way I hadn't before that this man would come back. People like him always do, but next time I wouldn't come empty-handed. Next time I would bring something heavier than bolt cutters. I would bring justice. The rain outside still hadn't let up. Thunder rolling, distant like the dying breath of the sky, and I sat down hard on the floor with my back against the wall, my hands still shaking, and the pry bar's imprint stinging in my palm, while Dr. Raoul came over and laid a steady hand on my shoulder, his face worried but calm in the way of someone who's lived too long on the thin line between life and death. "Rest, Ethan," he said quietly. "They're stable for now." I looked through the steamed glass. Raven lay in the kennel beside her 3 pups, all wrapped in white towels under the soft amber light, their breaths small and in time with the rain tapping the roof, fragile but real. I breathed out, but my throat stayed tight. Dr. Rowell went back to the warming station, adjusting the heater, and said their heart rates are coming back. The smallest one's still weak, but she's breathing. I rose and stepped close to the cage, kneeling, and Raven lifted her head and looked at me with a look that made my knees want to give out. "Hey, girl," I whispered. "You did well. You saved them." She licked my finger through the bars, then lay her muzzle on the smallest pup, and I felt the faint wavering warmth through the blanket like a fragile miracle. I've seen miracles in fire, people pulled back from the black, but nothing simple and fierce like this. I asked Raoul what happens next. He sighed. "Next we wait. We feed them every 2 hours, keep them warm, and protect the mother. Then we find whoever did this." His last sentence made my hand close until it hurt. "We'll find him," I said. "No one who does something like that should breathe the same air as them." Raoul nodded once, voice low. "You can't save the whole world, Ethan." I looked at Raven. Rainlight cast the tree's shadows on the wall like flames, and I said slowly, "No." But tonight I saved 4 pieces of it. Time slipped. The heater hummed, and the rain tapped on metal. I stayed by the cage hand flat against the glass eyes fixed on the 3 tiny bodies, and after a long while one of them twitched and let out a soft little gasp. A tiny hiccup of life, and I jumped up, shouting, "Raoul!" He came running, and both of us bent over as the smallest drew a deeper breath and gave a faint thread-like cry, and Raoul laughed, his face lighting up like a child's. "She's breathing on her own." I smiled, the first true smile I'd had in days. Raven raised her head and looked at us wet-eyed and licked the pup's nose with a sound that was no longer pain but thanks, and if there was a prayer in this world, that moment felt like one. I took a clean towel and wiped the mud from her neck. "You're safe now," I told her. "No more pain, no more chains." She rested her head on my hand and exhaled. Raoul turned to me. "You know, not many people would have stopped Ethan." My voice was rough but steady. "Then the world needs more who do." He smiled and left me there with them as the storm eased into a few quiet drops, the ceiling light reflecting in the glass over our faces. I laid a hand against the cage and whispered like a promise to myself, "I'll make them pay." For every breath you almost lost. Outside, the thunder faded, and a rare stillness settled, and inside that small room, warmth and life crept back inch by inch, each breath from those 3 like a new beat for the world. I glanced at the wall clock. Its minute hand had just ticked past 12, and a new day had begun. And from this moment on, I was no longer just the man who put out fires. I was the man who would light one for justice, for Raven, and for every voiceless life. 3 days had passed since that stormy night, but I hadn't slept a full hour. Every time I closed my eyes, the image looped, 3 tiny bleeding bodies swinging in the Texas noon and that hollow-eyed figure at the fence staring back, and I could not shake it, because justice hadn't yet answered. The shelter had calmed. Raven was recovering faster than anyone expected, able to stand pace her kennel lick each puppy, and then lie down with eyes softened, as if the nightmare had been shoved behind her, and the pups grew stronger by the hour, letting out weak little whimpers and long, sleepy yawns in the warmth, and I would sit for hours just watching them breathe. But the shadow outside had no name. That morning, I drove back to where it began, the dry, dirt road, the lone oak still standing like a mute witness, and the wind carried dust and gasoline while the sun baked the sand until it steamed, and I stepped out of the truck into the tread marks of the silver pickup, bent down, and picked up a length of rusted wire that jabbed my palm and drew a thin bead of blood, and the small sting tightened my chest into a fist. I photographed the scene and called Deputy Harris, an old friend on the Amarillo force, and his voice through the line was rough and clipped. "Still can't believe what you found out there, Ethan. But yeah, I'll send a team. Don't do anything stupid. You know me," I said. And he answered, "That's exactly why I said it." Less than an hour later, a white and blue cruiser rolled up with lights flashing through the red dust, and Harris climbed out, hat low, squinting at the land. "Jesus, whoever did this didn't even try to hide it," he muttered as he picked up the remnant of red cord and shook his head. "Sick bastard." We followed the fence line to where I'd seen the figure disappear and found old tire ruts leading to an abandoned farm. Red Hollow Farm, its sagging sign half decayed, and inside a pen that smelled of meat iron and ash, the kind of smell that only someone who's been at a fire scene would recognize. And I saw rusted stalls, chains, broken frames, the dried outlines of animals long gone, and realized this wasn't one isolated cruelty. It was a pattern. I had to look away. My hand shook until the pry bar I gripped bit the skin, and Harris laid a steadying hand on my shoulder and said in a low voice, "We'll get him, Ethan. I promise. Nobody walks away from this." I didn't answer. I stared out over the scorched field where dark clouds were massing, and thought of Raven and the fragile breaths I'd rescued, and I understood that saving a life sometimes means going back, facing what threw it into the fire in the first place. That night, I went back to the shelter. Raven heard the truck and perked up, tail wagging a small tired beat, and when I leaned over the kennel, her nose pressed to my hand and her scarred neck brushed my palm. "It's over now," I whispered. "They won't hurt you again." Dr. Raoul stepped out with a sad smile. "You look like a man who just fought hell and won." "Not hell," I said softly, "just the kind of evil that hides in daylight." He gave a rueful nod. "That's the harder one." I looked at Raven and her sleeping pups, their even breathing warming the room, and for a moment, all I had ever lost comrades' trust. Peace felt like it was being slowly given back in the soft rise and fall of their chests, and I knelt, pressed my forehead to the cage, and promised in a voice only I heard, "I'll make sure you and your babies never feel fear again." No one gets left behind. Not this time. Outside, the Texas sunset spilled like a burn across the plains. But this time, that fire felt different. It was the light of life, of compassion, and of a justice that had begun to flicker. 2 weeks after that night of rain, the first sunlight of May spilled through the rescue center's glass windows in Amarillo, laying soft ribbons of gold across the tile floor and into Raven's kennel. Her 3 pups had opened their eyes, wobbling on unsteady legs across the fleece blanket, curious and clumsy. I leaned against the doorframe, a cup of coffee in hand, and for the first time in years, my heart was quiet. Dr. Raoul came up beside me, a tired smile carving lines around his eyes. "You see that? That's what healing looks like." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said, watching Raven. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Raven was strong now. Her black and tan coat had grown back sleek and glossy under the morning light. The scar around her neck was fading, just a faint band, like a ghost of what had been. When I came closer, she lifted her head, those deep brown eyes carrying something I couldn't name. Gratitude, peace, and maybe forgiveness. I knelt down, letting the pups crawl into my hands. They were still small enough that one palm could hold them. One of them nuzzled my finger, its breath warm and steady like a whisper saying, "We're safe now." I smiled. "Yeah, you're safe. All of you." That's when Deputy Harris walked in holding a thick envelope. "Morning hero," he said. "We got him." I turned, hardly daring to believe. "You mean," he nodded, "the man from Red Hollow, he's in custody, confessed to more than one case. You did well, Ethan." I gripped his hand tight, a wave of lightness washing through me. Justice had come at last, not through guns or rage, but through the courage of not turning away. When Harris left, I turned back to Raven. "It's over," I whispered. "No more pain." Raven stepped forward, pressing her head against my leg, and I could feel her heartbeat slow, steady, alive. And in that instant, I knew it wasn't just me who had saved her. She had saved me, too. That night, I went home. The little house on the edge of Amarillo had once been so empty that even the ticking clock sounded like a sigh. But now, everything was different. Raven lay by the sofa, her 3 pups curled up in a heated basket by the fire. The flames reflected in their eyes, flickering like fragments of a miracle. I brewed tea and sat down the room glowing in soft amber light, a quiet, simple peace that held everything I'd ever longed for, after years of chasing fires, watching lives collapse, and carrying the weight of helplessness. Raven lifted her head and came closer, resting her muzzle on my knee. I stroked her gently, feeling the calm rhythm of her breath. "We made it," I whispered. She looked at me for a long time, then exhaled softly as if to agree. There are living souls that can't say thank you. But if you listen long enough, you'll hear it in their breathing and the way they lie beside you without fear, without running anymore. I used to think I saved Raven, but the truth is she saved the part of me that still believed kindness wasn't extinct, that the world could be more than ashes and smoke. A month later, I returned to the center with a big bag of food and a wooden sign I'd carved myself. On it were the words, "No one gets left behind." I hung it above the first kennel, the place where I'd found Raven trembling. Every visitor who came to adopt an animal saw it, and Raoul would smile and say, "That's Ethan's rule." We turned that place into more than a rescue center. It became a home for every forgotten life, every beaten dog, every broken cat, every pair of eyes that had once only known the floor. I started sharing Raven's story not for praise, but to remind people that justice doesn't always live in courtrooms. It lives in the smallest choices in the moment someone stops their car, opens a door, or simply refuses to look away. And whenever someone asked me, "Why did you stop that day?" I'd smile, glance at Raven running through the sunlit yard, her pups chasing her through the golden light, and say, because sometimes the only fire worth running into is the one that keeps another soul alive. If you've made it this far, take just 1 second to share this story or follow Call of Hope Rescue. Not for me, but for those trembling souls still out there waiting for someone to stop. Every share is a chance. Every viewer a breath returned to life. Stay with us, stay with compassion, because sometimes the only thing a soul needs is someone brave enough not to walk away.